Isn't that funny how America became the land of the stilted and the home of the wary of being canceled? Just kind of like over the last 10 years, it just came out of nowhere. This pressure to think right or to get out, you know?
Yeah, well, I don't think we invented it. I think it's been around one form or another forever and a half. But I think there's a lot of regimes, so forth, that have had that. I mean, I don't think you can. People all called Trump Hitler, but if Trump had been Hitler, you wouldn't be saying it. Whatever the insult would have been to Hitler, you wouldn't have been able to use those terms. So I think it's fairly new application here. I'm not a massive historian, but I think in the course of human history, it is an aberrancy not to have that.
Yeah.
So, if you look back, I was listening to your interview with Leor Sapir, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and he made this point that if you were just landed from space or whatever, and you were at a university, so let's say from 20 years ago, you'd be like, wow, what an amazing thing. People can have ideas and discourse and so forth. And this is an awesome space. But I don't think that has been the standard. I'm not sure it was the standard in the Roman Empire or any number of other kingdoms and potentates and whatnot.
Yeah. It takes a certain sort of either confidence or some sort of structural background to allow for open discourse, whatever open discourse is. And open discourse is never really open because people are, soil discourse in a number of different ways, either by aggressive tactics or, by speaking about things that other people don't want to talk about, like injecting vulgarity into the discourse, right? So open discourse isn't, free speech isn't the thing. It's about good speech. It's about great speech. It's about, discovering truth or entering into a dialogue in order to go somewhere with discourse. So the open platform was never really open. It always, even colleges, they were gate kept at some point by intelligence or by connections, right? You had to be of a certain class or a certain standing or a certain capability in order to even get in the door. And then when you were there were pressures, selective pressures to be intelligent, right? Or to keep on topic in one way or another. And so the way that it's changed over the course of my life, over the last 10 years for me. So 10 years ago, I started later on in life at a liberal arts college in Washington, Olympia, Washington.
In the old sense of the word, the most liberal. Of them all. I mean, is it Evergreen? Is that it?
Yeah, the Evergreen State College. Yeah, very, very progressive. Not just liberal, but progressive.
I know the liberal has had a number of different meanings over time. I think the Romans, had the liberal arts. They had the trivium actually as their liberal arts. So both those words have changed. I mean, we think of things as trivial when they're meaningless, but the trivium was the center part. There was basically the not reading, writing, arithmetic, but it was rhetoric. What was it? What were the other two?
Geometry or something like that?
Yeah, anyway, so they were the central core, but they were things that one needed to be a free man and be able to lead life. And so that was a class distinction because the Romans who were doing that were not slaves, obviously. So a little bit of the things you're talking about with this, you had to be in the group. So it was a club of sorts. But those liberal arts were those things that were necessary to live the full life of a citizen and be able to be competent and capable in doing so. Yeah. And so this has been transmuted over time as liberal arts, obviously, and then also in the terms of what it is to be liberal, which is, with the root word of freedom. So a lot of what's liberal is no longer liberal. And then, of course, you have progressive, which is not really progressive in the sense of moving us forward. But I apologize.
Well, it's moving us in a certain direction forward. The progressives really do think that forward, they think they know, or some of them might know better than others what that forward is. And of course, when we critique any movement, it's really easy to straw man it or focus on the plebs or the people in the streets. But I think at the same time, by the fruits you shall know them. Like you'll be able to tell about the inner core of the ideology by how the lowest of the people who adherents to it act and behave. And then back to what you're saying about the triumvirate?
Trivium.
Trivium. I have a book on it over there that I haven't gotten around to. Trivium. So it's not just about competency. It seems like schooling was to develop a certain type of man, right? Rather than just skills or anything. Not just the parts of knowledge or capability, but a type of man was being molded, a citizen of the empire. And so I'm sure that as Harvard and the Ivy League colleges, they were first set up as seminaries, so they were trying to create a type of man, and there was a moral core to that all the knowledge was wrapped around it, a moral core, or like an idealized man, and probably white Anglo-Saxon Protestant or something like that, with a ethnicity and a cultural heritage and so on and so forth. But that is still the case today, and I wonder to what extent that has changed, and if that was not always the case, or if we let go of that and then it came back, right? Because activists have taken over colleges and are trying to create activists out of students from kindergarten onward, right? They are trying to create a type of man. Now, that if we critique what that man they are creating is, and it's not even a man anymore, it's a they, them. It's not even, it doesn't even have an identity other than some sort of intersectional identity, and then some sort of relationship not to God, but to the state and to structure, which is very hypocritical or contradictory, because they're being taught to overturn all the order and then give all of themselves over to the order at the same time. There's this, on one current, they're taught to trust the state and to render themselves under to the medical industrial complex, or to all these different libertine kind of behaviors, but at the same time they're being taught explicitly to overthrow power structures, because power structures are inherently oppressive, right? And so there's just this odd confluence of people who think that they're being radicals, but they are in line with a tremendous system that spans like a global order, that has pretensions to a unified one American government, and using technology to affect that, to submit everybody to its management, right? So that man is still there, and to what extent that man is free or capable to be free after 24 years of school, or however long somebody is in school, is an open question. How long did you go to school? What was your relationship to education?
So my experience with education, I did well. I mean, I tested well. I was avid. I was interested. I didn't really have that much issues. I have an older brother who's only slightly older, and a younger brother who's much younger. So my brother and I, my older brother and I, we were kind of in this, death struggle, for attention and competition and whatnot. And so I was, smaller, and I got bullied a little bit. I don't know. I just always felt like I, should work hard. And the parents put that up. We lived in a tiny rent-controlled apartment, technically a one-bedroom apartment, with ultimately 5 people, 3 boys growing up in it. It was very tight. My mother was a decorator, and she was a little bit of a hoarder as well. So it was our internal space was not that great. I think we got along considering. So to be out and about was some, time to kind of make progress. And I didn't want to be in the same situation of being in a tiny little 1-bedroom rent-controlled apartment when I grew up. So I knew to do that, I had to work a certain amount. But I was fortunate because I'm kind of a quick study, and I retain things, and good memory and all that stuff. And so I had the benefit of finding things I liked and doing well in them, and then I got rewarded for that by teachers and this and that. But I never overstudied. I mean, I'm the only person throughout college and medical school who never did an all-nighter. I mean, at a certain point in medical school, you have to be up all night to do clinical stuff. But as far as studying, whatnot, I get my things done in a reasonably orderly fashion, and just do it. I didn't let things go, and I went to class. So, I mean, is that, kind of a goody two shoes? I don't know. I don't think so. Because, I picked and chose the things that I liked, and for the most part. So I grew up in a time of luxury, I guess, in a sense, It wasn't physical luxury. Like I said, we kind of, my brother and I shared and then my younger brother, we shared a 6x9 room, with bunk beds and whatnot. We're on top of each other, and my brother and I didn't get along. We still don't. So there's always tensions. I mean, no life is perfect, but a lot of things kind of took on their own luster. My parents sacrificed for us, and we were in public school till seventh grade, and then my older brother wanted to go to this private school, Horace Mann, in New York City, and then they asked me the next year, and my grandfather was kind of paying the freight a little bit. They asked me, and it's like, well, if he's going, I had no care about it, but if he's going, I had to go. And we wound up there. My grandfather promptly, unfortunately, passed away. God rest his soul. But I was only 1 year into that school, and the money wasn't there. So my parents had to work extra hard, and they didn't take us out. But every now and then we got taken out because we couldn't keep up with the tuition, and there was no financial aid at that school and that kind of stuff to speak of.
But the education itself, was it ideological, or I guess
well,
of course it would be.
It's
but
always some of that. In public school, we didn't get what we're getting now. I don't really remember any kind of in my public school education, any kind of real politics, except, we pledged allegiance and we learned history. It was pretty bland stuff. I don't really remember political injection. At Horace Mann, I think a lot of the teachers were leftists, but they didn't kind of lord it over you. There was, I think the teaching profession in general skews to the left. I was not that much aware of it, but there were opportunities to hear other voices, I think, as well. In college, I was a chemistry and physics major, so you can't, at that time, little did we know, you couldn't really inject that much politics and mathematics, chemistry, physics, biology, although we're seeing it now. And so I was a little bit freed from that. For whatever reason, I found some of the more exciting, like I took an economics course by this guy, Mark Rosenzweig, and I guess he was not a leftist. And I learned a lot of interesting, monetary theory. It's kind of like it was before Reaganomics and whatnot. But it led me to think differently politically. I have to say that what kind of the big college, political education I had was random. One of my roommates his dad worked for McGraw-Hill, and he happened to get an endless subscription to the Wall Street Journal. I had no interest in this because I didn't care about stocks or whatever. I thought it was a business paper. But over the years, he didn't care about it. I started reading it, mostly for the editorial page and the op-ed. And then when I went to medical school, I asked him if I could just keep it. So I put his name, care of, at my address. And I got the Wall Street Journal through medical school and beyond for free. Don't tell anybody. And I think that was kind of the most interesting education, because they had kind of reproducible, verifiable manner of writing things, and there were certain events of the news. And I grew up in New York City. We were all Democrats. We were either a liberal Democrat or a left of that. And everybody I knew, all my family, everybody around us, all Democrats, all of the left. And it was the first time I'd heard any other voice. Well, I just thought Republicans were horrible and conservatives were horrible. And it was only when I read the Wall Street Journal and some of these horrible people were writing some of the stuff, and I got to see, over time what happened. The Reagan election was a pivotal moment in my political thought, because I was taught to really hate Ronald Reagan, and then lo and behold, the Soviet Union fell over time, and a lot of other things happened that kind of, the economy got so much better. New York City got better. I grew up in a time when New York City was what it's turning into now. It was a hellhole. I got mugged numerous times. It was not safe. The subways were graffiti filled, and there was this concept that's the way things had to be. The economic malaise and the malaise in general that Jimmy Carter spoke of. That was my teenage years, and I didn't disagree with that. And the fact that things could get better in a hellhole like New York City, that was just like one of those jaw drop moments for me. Anyway, I'm sorry for going on too long.
Yeah, no, not at all. But there was an article that came out today from the New York Times that sided once again with, I can't remember the poor man's name, but there was a man who was choked out on a subway car.
Oh, Jordan Neely.
And the media has been trying to turn him into, sorry for the derogatory term, bum Floyd. They're really trying to get this as another civil rights kind of moment, like this
Absolutely.
racial reckoning or this class reckoning, because that's the mode that they're in. And today, I didn't read the article, but I read the headlines and the comments on it, was trying to position everybody, all bystanders in that car that allowed this man who was threatening people to be choked out. Everybody's culpable. Everybody's guilty for not standing up for the citizen. And the guy who took care of that threat is, of course, the vilified individual. He's a white male. I don't know if they bring that white male in to it, but if you see the picture of him, he's very
if it had been
heroic
race
looking.
flipped, you wouldn't be hearing about this. Or even
No,
if it was
yeah.
just black on black, you wouldn't be hearing. He would be a hero for a black guy. This guy's a former Marine. Almost any of the, everything's turned into this race thing. You have to see who it is, and then you can decide whether you're going to be upset or not.
Yeah, but it seems like the New York Times is not concerned for the normal people of New York. So somebody like Reagan or whoever was it Giuliani that flipped around New York? So they're people like that are vilified by the establishment, but they're heroes to the normal people because they take these tough measures. Like they're kind of like John Wayne. They're like the bad guy that comes in and does the good deed for the town, and then the town can't handle them anymore and they need to leave, right? So Giuliani, Reagan come in just as icons. I know that they're complex characters. I'm not saying that they're all heroic, but they come in, they kick the shit. They get shit done, and they have to take a certain stance that's non-humanitarian. It's it actually battens down on certain behaviors. It cleans up all that porn or the peep shows that are in Times Square, right? They clean up the city, and so they're hated by the establishment, who then reaps the benefit of a clean street because then the people actually benefit. It's just this weird disconnect between the elite and what the elite want and what normal people actually want. And I don't know how to square that particular circle, but you can kind of notice it, and it is irritating. And then when it gets to a point right now where every major professional, not organization, but career is now directed through this woke kind of regimen of, always thinking about the marginalized first, always, erasing biological reality in order to justify certain specific delusions, right? And the outcomes of that are consistently ignored. The negative outcomes are consistently ignored because we're pursuing justice in the moment.
Right.
It's maddening.
I agree with you. I did
Upsetting.
make one misstep. Giuliani, I think, was the 90s. Dinkins was the 80s. So New York lagged after Reagan and whatnot. But Giuliani cleaned things up in the 90s.
Okay.
I just wanted to make that one footnote. But
Thank you.
You're making a very reasonable point. It's a funny thing. The elites have, they have a disjointed view of reality, and I think they have their vulnerabilities. And they might have guilt over having things in advance of what they might have earned if they're inherited wealth and whatnot. But they want things to stay okay so they can be safe. Now they have a lot of safe spaces. They can go to the Hamptons or whatever the analogous places and other locales, and they don't, they're not going to hang out with hoi polloi. And so they have this vision that they're going to help those people by giving them things. And this is not something they would even do for their own children per se. Or if they do, they wind up with spoiled children. Again, Michael Gerson, the late speechwriter of, I think, Bush 1 and Bush 2, wrote, he phrased it the soft bigotry of low expectations. We have this concept that other people are not going to be able to do. People of the lower classes are not going to be able to do these great things that we've done, and we have to, kind of put them in the places as if they were doing that thing. And this doesn't actually play out in the NFL or the NBA. There's no, equalization or equity of racial characteristics to reflect the community. In Salt Lake, the Utah Jazz don't have a certain number of Mormons on the team to reflect the community. And, what they're looking for is a team that's good. And what they're looking at, their expectations are that if a guy's from Serbia, or if he's from Detroit, or from whatever, whether he's going to be able to do the things that they tell him to do in a basketball sense, or whatever other team sport you want. And so for some reason, we can't transmute this and transfer it and transport it to the academic realm anymore. Although we did. I mean, never has it been perfect. I don't think there's any time where we can stop the world and get off, or stop the world and get on, and see that things are perfect. I think we're always in a state of flux, but I think there have been better and worse situations of flux. And I think we're heading to a kind of a death spiral of the intellectual realm. Not necessarily the worst thing if we can come up with some, corollary or different pillar. And I think we already have and already will. I don't want to expand this too far afield, but the climate, global warming, whatever you want to call it, alarmists think that this is just going to happen. Like one day the earth is going to turn up 5 degrees and we're all going to boil. I don't think it's quite like that. I think that people at any given moment are always reacting to the situation around. And so in the Netherlands, they probably had water issues. So they built dikes and they reclaimed land. They started farming in triple-decker, internal lit. The Netherlands is the single largest food exporter in Europe, if excluding war-torn Ukraine. And it's an amazing thing because it's tiny. It's the size of Rhode Island. And how do they do it? I mean, they have to feed their own people. And you think, how could they possibly do it? So they've engineered things. And so humans are ingenious, and we can engineer things, if that's not the same word. And so we wind up moving ahead. What's happening in the academy, and we can maybe come back to Evergreen and some of your experiences, but what's happened in the academy is a hollowing out. There are some trees I'm looking out at, and they're healthy trees, but every now and then you see one that falls precipitously. And then, when it's on the ground, I see people, the arborists come and they slice it up and whatnot, and the thing's been hollowed out. They're termites or whatever living in it. They've been living in it for a while. A lot of our institutions are like that. They don't need to have been that way. I think the buildings will outlast some of the general intellectual theories and intellectual heft. And it's a sadness because I loved college. I went to Yale University, and I think it was an amazing place. It still could possibly be one, but it's not that thing if you can't have debate. The essence of it is debate. I think college means to read together, and colloquial means to talk together, and seminar, I don't know. I don't want to get too far into the words, but all of these things have to do with having ideas passed around. And if you exclude certain ideas, I think you're in trouble. Everything is made to be, this is Hitlerian. You can't say this because it's going to inflame the world. I disagree. I think you have a better time identifying Hitlerian thought if you have an open discourse about it.
Can we do a thought experiment with your experience with addiction?
Sure.
I was just thinking, I spoke with a libertarian yesterday, and libertarians, I still don't understand. They have such complex theories, and everything's really wordy too. They don't know how to just meme quite yet. That's one weakness of libertarians. But I did a thought experiment with him. What if somehow, without thieving or conquering, you inherited San Francisco? How would you deal with an ideal society or a libertarian society? Because San Francisco, it looks like you get to either do all the drugs you want or make all the money you want, right? And there's and those two power classes are squashing out people. But just to transpose that on, how the elite that are nominally left or leftish or neoliberal neocons, how they think about fixing society, how they think about their largesse and implementing all these programs to help the poor or the hoi polloi, and how that might be related to a disease model for society. I'm wondering if there is some sort of corollary towards societal malfunction and addiction, and how there's different ways of perceiving how to fix such a problem, and if the disease model is a diseased model, or is you see that echoed in the elite.
Well, you're making an interesting point. I mean, I'm going to give you the answer in 2 words. Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
Harm reduction.
Okay.
Harm reduction, I think, is the thread that links these things. Harm reduction is one of these great neologisms or it's not quite a portmanteau, but it's a combination word which doesn't quite mean or act out in the way it's said. It's like affirmative action. It sounds awesome. It's hard to argue with affirmative action. I want to do affirmative action every morning when I get up. I want to act affirmatively.
Okay,
Harm
all right.
reduction. I mean, who doesn't want to reduce harm? I mean, these are always no-brainers. Who doesn't want social security? I want social security. I want harm reduction. I want affirmative action. I want progressivism. I want all these things. I just don't happen to want them the way they actually turn out. So they are maybe like the wolf wearing Red Riding Hood's cloak. They have hidden danger, and it's a naive person who doesn't understand that there are potential unintended consequences. There's no such thing as a free lunch. That kind of stuff. So the harm reduction is an all-encompassing field, and I think they are happy to call it harm reduction, mind you. And the concept is that you are going to help people avoid negative outcomes. And how are you going to do that? Basically, you're going to put them in a bouncy castle of life. I don't know if you have kids. Have you been in the bouncy castle? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
And so, if they're in there, they can bounce around all they want, and they can jump up and down, and maybe they can break their necks, I suppose. But for the most part, they're going to bounce off the walls, and they're going to be comfortable and all that kind of stuff. That is life. I think there's getting back to our friends, the elites, I think there's this concept that if you give them bread and circuses, they will be happy. I think this avoids the essence of the internal struggle that individuals have. We were mentioning bullying. Nobody likes bullying, but it's kind of an annealing process. The way metals are strengthened and so forth. You cannot have strength unless somebody points out where your weaknesses are. And I don't want to be bullied. Okay. I enjoy being bullied, but you have to be strong enough to understand that you can survive certain things. People love my boys, they're men. They love gaming, the various games and whatnot. What is this? This is an eternal test. I like watching. I can't really play basketball. I can minimally, I was a decent, touch football quarterback, but I couldn't play any of these sports. But I live the struggles and the trials because they're right out there and you're pushing yourself to the extreme. This is the essence of man, men, and what men need is their struggle. I don't think it's precisely the same for women, but when you take away the struggle and you think that people can be anesthetized and be happy because they've been receiving certain things, this does not work out.
The bouncy castle inevitably turns into a padded cell.
That is an excellent way of putting it. I would think about the lion. A zoo lion might very well live longer than a wild lion. I'm not sure how the wild lions are doing. I'm not going to comment on that per se, but historically say, would you rather be in the zoo where you get your food on a regular basis, or would you rather be doing your lion thing because you are the lion? You're the guy out there, and you can stalk and you can hunt and so forth. And when you have your meal, I imagine for lion-ish people, lionish animals, that they can be lying around, having done their lion stuff, and that is awesome. It just kind of they've had their meal, so forth. Maybe it wasn't that great for the hyena or the gazelle or whatever, but you're doing the lion stuff. Now, conversely, you get caught and you're put in the cell. You're given all your needs. You probably get injections and medication, all this kind of stuff, and they take care of the little, I don't know, the lice you might have in your coat. Is that a better existence? Well, harm reduction says yes. And I don't think that's necessarily how people act and react, and I don't think that's how they have the fulfillment. And essentially, without getting religious about it, I don't think that's how they find their God, and I don't think that's how they align with their, I'm not going to say happiness, but satisfaction in life.
Yeah. There's we're on the eve of the great month of Bacchanalia, or I think we call it Pride for some reason.
It used to be a sin. I don't know. It used to be a sin.
It used to be a sin, but they extended Pride from a day to a week to a month, and now a season, and it precedes the fall finally. So they're really
literally
trying to
that's
get
pretty good. I got
right
that one
up in there. But it serves, and we speak about the elite, but I think of it as this, just the path that we're on, this just this path of technological rationalization or rationalism, and just the path of decadence, the path of empire, crumbling empire. And it serves empire, or it serves this, whatever this organism is, or this meta organism is. It serves it that we expend our energies into the shortest sighted forms of satisfaction. Celebrating our sexualities, and judging each other for our phobias, right? And once we lose contact with phobia, once the phobia has been shaken out of us, then all we have is our pride, and we have no shame, we have no restraint, we have no humility, and then we have no connection to actually that which forms ourselves into free agents, self-controlled agents who can build lives that propagate, and that propagate better and better, or greater and greater, or just good people, children, right? So this expenditure into polyamory, and into all these forms of sexuality that are inherently dead ends, and you're not supposed to say that homosexuality is lesser than heterosexuality, but by the very fact of nature, heterosexuality actually provides us with more humans. But that whole jumble of deconstructing that hierarchy, deconstructing that long-term thinking, deconstructing saying that one thing is better than the other because that means that something is worse, and we can't have that. It strips our society of that which made it great. Made it better than just good, made it better than just, survival and stuff like that. And for whatever reason, I think that empire, whatever that thing is called, doesn't really give a damn about that. It doesn't really give a damn about rational agents or, upstanding citizens. And I guess it was, again, mentioning something in current events a couple days ago. There's this guy up in Canada, I think he's running for premier, and he seems like a kind of a centrist, if not a conservative. And he was asked by a reporter why there was this really interesting exchange where the reporter was trying to say that we should stop doing bail. We should let criminals go free because they keep on committing crimes while they're on bail. And it was this weird exchange. I can't really replicate it because it doesn't make any sense other than the fact that it's always society's fault. And so everything is society's fault except for society, which is good, upstanding citizens' fault. There's another term called stochastic terrorism that we see in the decriminalization of criminality and the criminalization of security, of actual upright citizens defending themselves from criminals. They're the ones who get prosecuted by the DAs, and the criminals are the ones who are set free. And who does that serve?
Yeah.
Who does that serve?
It's nobody. It serves nobody. It's kind of a self-abnegation. These things are religious structures, and I think there's something in where this. That's not my phrase, but supposedly man has a God-sized hole in his heart, and we're trying to come up with some religious structure, and so there are various penance acts and so forth. But what people are kind of forgetting in a very pragmatic sense is that. The reason the state is there in the first place, the reason that you have the power to, do transfer payments or to set people, free or whatnot, is that the state is an easier version of blood vengeance. Absent the state, you kill my relative, I have to kill 2 of your relatives, and you come back and kill 4 of my relatives. You have tribalism. The people who don't want, they don't want nations. They want to get rid of national borders. Yeah. These things were, were the state essentially is a way of abstracting what lies innate within us. It is impossible to get rid of our urges. I don't think anybody can watch, his wife get raped and not want to kill that person, okay? And the only thing that keeps you from going all Charles Bronson, vigilante on that is this kind of promise that we understand, we get that pain, we understand that pain. Yeah. We understand the pain of your child, getting hit by a drunk driver. That this guy couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the rules, of the road. And there are rules of the road because the road is a wonderful place. It's a wonderful place. It's how I get, to my, get out to play tennis or go to work, whatever, get my lunch. It's a great thing, the road, but it only acts well. And it's miraculous. If you went up to the satellite and look at rush hour every day, millions and hundreds of millions of people all around the globe at different times of day are going back and forth, and they're not hitting each other. Yeah. They're not hitting each other. They're like corpuscles in your blood, which, they don't need brains either, but they're kind of working under a impulsion and so forth. They don't have any choice. They're just doing things on fluid dynamics. But here you have a bunch of people who are deciding where they should be and how they should be, and they stay out of each other's way. Now, if you're the guy who decides that he'd rather get his buzz on and then do that, well, you are a asterisk hole, and you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be out and bound. If you do it repetitively, well, then definitely that's the case. Yeah. So these things are to take us away from our own tribal innate human instincts. And everyone wants to be non-human. Everyone wants to have this kind of transhumanist aspect. Somehow we can get
even you want to be a superhero.
Well, I did want to be a superhero. My son was a superhero for a long time. We had to address him. He's going to be embarrassed, but he can stand it. For a year practically, we had to address him as Batman. We didn't all the time, but he always had a cape. But we didn't,
Did you affirm his? So you affirmed you did a social transition.
Other people
did. You give him some batarangs?
Other people did more than we did. If he had to go to bed, no, he couldn't stay out because he had to fight crime. No, he had to go to bed. And
but did he sleep upside down? Did he go all the way?
Yeah, I know. So it's just kind of a funny thing. We think that we can take away our animal aspects, and it's weird because we love dogs, we love cats, and we understand those things are animals. They have their animal instincts. They pee in the corner. We understand it, why they did it. They're rubbing up against each other. We understand why they have urges. We too have urges. I was thinking of this meme. Speaking of memes, there's a dog with the kind of the sad dog eyes, and he's like, please, while you're eating that cheese, I hope you remember that there are others around you who also like cheese. The dog likes cheese. We like cheese. We have certain things that animate and motivate. So if you're walking outside on Memorial Day and you smell a barbecue, it's different from smelling a carrot. If you can smell a carrot, I don't know if you can.
If they're boiled, I guess.
So we have kind of urges that we have to channel and filter and funnel into the right places. Now that can be done well, and it can be done poorly. What conservative is not an exciting name like progressive, but conservatives are working on something that has, they're trying to conserve those things that frankly have been means tested over time. I go to a synagogue, and we got the Old Testament. We didn't get renovate our Testament. We have just the old one, but still a lot of it's in thus spoke and begat this one and some odd names. But the underlying themes, they are ancient and they are current. People have the same desires. They have the same envies. They have the same urges. They didn't just make the 10 Commandments. He didn't just come down with them right. Oh, geez, what would be 10 awesome things? There were things that people were doing that were coveting. They were adulterating, whatever the word is, verb.
And yet at the same time, I'm just thinking that there's a proverb, enjoy the wife of your youth. So within the Old Testament, there is, there are strictures, but there's also a love and an appreciation of beauty, Song of Solomon. There's there is a time for fasting and a time for feasting. And so it is balanced in that way. In allowing the appetites to roam within really constrained forms. And that goes back to what's the alternative to harm reduction? If harm reduction once scaled up to San Francisco or where New York is headed, it turns into only the harmful survive, and those who are trying to mitigate the harms of society are punished.
The elites have their Hamptons, and they have their security guards, and they've got ways of tunneling and so forth out of the situation. It's a sacrifice. What basically people have done is they have pets and they have adopted, this is not my term of art, but in the movies, there's a thing, the magical Negro. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
So that's a term of art. I'm not sure when it came up, in the
Or the
80s.
noble savage. We can apply that to cross races. Anybody who's lower class is the noble
Well,
savage.
but
Other than like the
the
Appalachian.
concept is that poor guy. If you see this movie after movie, that poor homeless guy, he's got the really words of wisdom
Yes.
that will change
Yes.
your life and so forth. And
Yeah.
oddly enough, that is actually not the case. I had a regular medical practice for 27 years in Revere, which is kind of a blue collar town, and then polyethnic. That we had the waves of Cambodian and Serbians and Bosnian, whatever, after various wars and other places come through, and then without wars we had Morocco and now Brazil and whatnot. And that was my turf. That was my window on the world in a sense. So I had the world come to me, and people don't, the people who are kind of bundled up and sleeping outside, whatever, they're homeless. We've come up with this another term. It's a kind of a euphemism. They were not homeless except in the extent that I was, for instance, yachtless, or I'm Ferrari less.
Wow, that's a good one.
They never had one.
God damn, that's hard.
Well, they never.
That's a good one.
It takes work and effort to have a home.
Yes.
You have to
Yeah.
pay your bills, and it's complicated. Being a citizen is not easy.
No.
I spend days on my taxes. I'm not looking for sympathy or tears or anything like that.
Well, people need to hear that they should spend a little time on their taxes. So,
but it is effort just to do that stuff. Now, even just to rent, it takes effort, and you have to put something in, because we're all part of this machine. You cannot just eat, and when we let people just eat. So, speaking of narcotic addiction,
yes, please.
In the early 2000s, Suboxone came along, and this was supposed to be. Suboxone is methadone light. So that there's methadone came along as a harm reduction concept in the 60s, and it was really initiated in the 70s under Nixon, and it took hold in the 80s. Each one of these thrusts, whether it was methadone, which was free, as it were. When I say free, it's always free to that user, not to everybody else or societally. Yeah. And then in the 2000s came along Suboxone. Suboxone was supposed to destigmatize methadone treatment or narcotic treatment, because nobody wanted to go to the methadone clinic because there's a bunch of methadone heads there. Yes. And people are nodding off. Methadone is really deep. Suboxone is a lighter methadone. It's called buprenorphine. It rhymes with morphine. And so it's not as deep a dopey high. But nonetheless, if I, virgin to opiates, if I took one, I would be asleep for the afternoon. You don't really kill yourself overdosing unless you're also taking Valium or benzodiazepine or whatever. But you don't want your kids they can overdose and die. So it is a real opiate. It's a little bit blander. Anyway, so Suboxone came out in the early 2000s, and what happened is that more people wind up being addicted to narcotics as a result. It
becomes a gateway.
Well, it's not just a gateway. What we used to do before this, people can't imagine there was a time before we had all these stipends for being poor. I was actually going to kind of segue into some of the my patient cohort skewed towards the Medicaid and disability crowd. They were young. I think median age was probably mid 30s, but almost a small percentage were working and supporting themselves, because it's hard to do. Most of them came in because their narcotic habit had gotten so unwieldy. At the time, $150, $200 a day, and you have to get that money somewhere, and it's hard to do that just by working at Panera or whatever. It's hard to do that. So people wind up doing secondary activities, one type or another, illicit, and to support a drug habit. They don't feel good about it, but they wake up feeling groggy and whatnot. They have to pursue the drug. It's tied in with a bunch of behavioral issues as well. And so the kind of the magical part where you see, the magical homeless person, say, in a movie, having the sage advice, well, maybe here and there. But my experience has been that the people who are really, kind of very much a slave to their drug use are not having enlightened thoughts and so forth. They're desperate. They're hungry, and they're kind of in battle mode to get that. So
they're becoming less and less human. in a way.
Hmm?
Well, they're becoming less and less human, or becoming disconnected from higher
Right.
forms
Right.
of
There,
life.
that's feral in a way. So that it's a dog eat dog kind of world, and
Yeah.
so they'll do dastardly things to each other, even. And so there's a fair amount of addict on addict crime and theft and whatnot, and sexual abuse and all this kind of stuff. It's not happy lives. There's this concept. There's liberation and there's libertine, and uh, there's kind of a romanticization, I think, from the Marquis de Sade of what kind of this kind of libertine world would be, that have there's some pleasure in the pain, but there's generally within pain there's pain, not pleasure. And people disrupting kind of the orderly, say, conservative aspects of their lives is not useful. And you take away the bonds and the friendships that help you get your satisfaction in life.
So, what is the counterpoint to the disease model of addiction, and what's the counterpoint of to harm reduction?
Right.
I can suppose you're going to say something along the lines of virtue or something like that, but
Well,
from your practice, just from like when you are successful in helping somebody be successfully overcome their drug addiction, what are some of the things that you see, the patterns of behavior that have to change, the attitudes, the narratives that actually help them?
well, first of all, just as far as the addiction itself, I compare it to a trauma. Like breaking your hip
Okay.
can kill you. Okay. And at certain stages in your life, you don't wind up the same. You may not walk the same, you may not walk at all. You might lose your leg. It doesn't mean you're the same after you break your hip. Nobody can give you everything back. It's like Humpty Dumpty. It's easier to fall off the wall than it is to put yourself back together. So I will not deny that narcotic addiction kills people and people lose their lives. So, but the formulation is not a disease. It's a trauma. It's something that happened for some other reason. Now, there's no disease of breaking your hip. There might be some underlying aspects. You might have poor balance. You might have poor sight. You might be in a dangerous neighborhood. You might be in a gang. There's a bunch of different things that can make you break your hip. You might be a crappy driver. You might be drunk, so forth. So the pathway to breaking one's hip is myriad, and potentially too towards narcotic addiction, I think less myriad. So there's, I don't want to minimize the experience, but to get out of it, there's a joke. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? Do you know that one?
Well,
It's a joke. I mean,
yeah, but what's the punchline? Is that the punchline? Do you know?
No, so the punchline is how many psychiatrists does it take to change the light bulb? Just one, but the light bulb has to really, really want to be changed.
Yeah. Okay, good.
And
Thank
so
you.
in this case, it's one of those things. We had an expression in medical school. I don't know if you still do this one, but the expression was alcoholics go to ground. And I didn't know what that meant when I heard it.
Yeah.
But over time, it basically, the state of being an alcoholic can be relatively blissful. It's not blissful, but it's, you've anesthetized the pain of life. So people get drunk for a reason. Their reality is painful. And so they get drunk, and there's there's probably a t-shirt. I don't have a drinking problem. I drink, I get drunk, I pass out, no problem. That kind of thing. So in the moment, I think especially initially, narcotic addicts are blissful. The opiate high is orgasmic. It's the same modality. Endorphins are called endorphins because they're endomorphines. And so morphine works from the opposite way. Morphine works because we have endorphins. Endorphins were named after morphine. So we only found out about endorphins because we had morphine, but morphine only works because you have endorphins. So a little bit of paradox there. So we pursue these things, and you can pursue them either well or poorly. And it's like almost anything else, you can pursue well or poorly. Sexually, I had this analogy, porno or the prom, and it's a little bit off color. But basically, if you're 16 years old and you are only interested in an orgasm, and you want that pleasure of an orgasm, and you can either plan to go to the prom 2 months hence, or you can do porno, which one is guaranteed to get you that orgasm?
Yeah.
Well, the porno is. Which one is going to cost you more? The prom. Which one involves embarrassment potentially? The prom. Which
Well,
one
unless your mom
is
walks
like
in during
totally consumes you, makes you scared out of your mind? The prom. Which one should you do? Which one should you do?
yeah.
You know, I mean, porno is there at any avail. It's always there. So, the harm reduction approach would be, why get rejected? Why would you have the possibility that your
Breaking your hip.
life's in hope, and you might, when you have the object of your desire, and he/she, tells you to go buzz off, whatever, you wind up jumping off a bridge. So harm reduction would dictate that you should stay home and do that other thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is not helpful. So the thing is, a lot of these things work, but they work only in the conception, of people's minds, and not in the reality, because we are a life-based form. We have our urges, and they've been set in, not quite in stone, unless you think about the Mosaic tablets. But that
Even
hand
those are broken.
and Mount Sinai, yeah. So they're, whether they're set in stone or not, I don't know. But we have motivations that seem to go across the board. We are an interesting species, because you can watch a movie from Thailand, turn the sound off, and you won't get the whole plot, but you can tell when people are happy, when you can tell when they're sly, you can tell when they're, have something that's we have one set of facial expressions worldwide. And so that implies that we have one set of kind of motivations. We can read these things. It's universal. And so, but people take this away as if we are going to become trans humans. And, we can somehow take away the motivations. We can take away our essence, and we can take away our telos. And you can do that. You make an excellent point earlier on about procreation and whether that's part of creation and so forth. I was Googling before I started with you today, just to bring this up potentially, about the Shakers. And, the Shakers were an offshoot of Quakers, and they did not procreate. They made great furniture. But you could join the Shakers, but there was no sex allowed. And it wasn't even like, most of your cults where the one guy gets to do it with everybody, but nobody else does. So the Shakers kept to their word. And it's hard to find Shaker communities now, because guess what? It is a dwindling proposition, not to have children. Not only that, but I think it's a sad proposition in a way.
Yeah. There's an image that you gave me, about like an anti-fragile Humpty Dumpty, right? Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty back together again. And the harm reduction model would be to super glue Humpty Dumpty back together again. Like you send in all the bureaucrats, right? And you fix this broken person by patching them all together with
harm reduction,
Suboxone, methadone, and stuff like that, right? You continue that breaking cycle. You treat the person as continually broken and as fragile as not being able to put itself back together again, and so it just has to be patchwork together again. But what I feel like you hinting at is that there is, in the addict, no matter how broken, there's still the possibility of a way out or a way to self-correction, right? But it has to be won by the self. It has to be owned by the self. The transference from the dependency on the substance has to be another sort of dependency, a dependency on oneself, perhaps a dependency on God.
That's very astute. No, I think we are addictive creatures.
Yeah.
I spent a long time, with I struggled with my addiction. I don't want to make it sound too trivial, but, playing squash, I'm working, and I had to go out there and play. I mean, it's an endorphin thing. It's the runner's high. And I found at one point in my 30s, I just loved playing squash. I lose myself. I'm pursuing the ball. You're in this white room and you're running as hard as you can, and you're keeping score, and it's like exciting, and you can get better at it. And, I didn't become the best squash player on earth, but I became the best squash player that I could possibly have been. And it was like captivating. And I would figure out ways that, I probably could have earned more cash, and I probably could have had a better this and that if I didn't play squash. I mean, I don't know if that's the case or not, because maybe it was the thing that was keeping me, tethered and able to deal with all the other stresses, because you have a huge stress release when you're on the squash court. There's literally, well, I don't know, figuratively, there's nothing else going on. It's just that thing. And when you're done, it's like, the world comes back.
Yeah.
And so if you leave your addiction, I think you have to, you don't stop saying, oh, well, I don't have any urges anymore. I don't want to get away from life. I don't think things are sucky. I don't have problems with my mom, my mother-in-law, or whatever. And people don't still think I'm, this and that. Things don't go away. You don't turn into Brad Pitt when you stop doing drugs. You are just with a hangover or
Yeah.
with needs and so forth. I had this thing I had called five. If I can count this high, there's my prop. I bring this with me everywhere I go.
Yeah.
So I can
Well,
remember
your
how to
hand
count.
or your ring?
Yeah, no, the hand.
Okay.
The five F's. So I forget. It was basically faith, family, funds, which is money,
Okay.
and what else? Friendship. I don't know if I'm being redundant here, and only lastly, fun. And so the idea is that in order to reconstruct your life, you need certain things. You need your family and your friends. But you need funds. You need to be working at something.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
and you need to have faith. I mean, I think people cannot really move on unless they have faith. Now, there's religion. I think people can have faith in other ways. They can be organizing around political thing or something like that.
Yeah.
But people
Yeah.
need,
Go woke. Totally.
yeah,
Do it.
they can. But you need a mission in life, and I don't agree with everybody's mission. I'm kind of a finicky person,
What's your
but I
mission?
do think that people can't do well unless they are living above and beyond their kind of material realm.
Yeah.
And so we have aspirations, and when you get those in check, and then mind you, you need some kind of replacement addiction. You go, people run, they're doing, lifting weights, they're going to church. It just has to be something that's better. And so the concept, the problem with harm reduction in general is that we are treating, again, this is the soft bigotry of low expectations. We think those people cannot possibly do better. And so even though we've seen the movie and the homeless guy has words of wisdom and whatnot, in reality, we don't think that's the case. And this is kind of puts the lie to it, that we are kind of locking them into this life that we think that's all they can pretty much handle. So we're going to give them their food, we're going to give them this, we're going to give them that, all the stuff that they don't have to think of. They can't do all those things that my daughter can. My daughter can go to law school and she can do this and this, but this guy can't. So we have to take care of him. Now, maybe he's not going to go to law school, but he probably can figure out, how to, I don't know, do some kind of work that's enough to keep him busy and captivated and so forth. And I think, we've historically, I think that's how people do better. This kind of the irony, over the gates of Auschwitz and Birkenau is, the Germans had Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free. I mean, their industry was perverse and horrible and satanic, but that one phrase is not wrong. It's like a broken clock. Work does make you free. You don't want to be working as a slave. You don't want to be working for somebody's behest. But the ability to get those things that you have is ownership. And when you have ownership, you have in the good sense of pride. You have accomplished something, and you can move on with your life.
Mm. So as you've aged, as you've gone through your different decades of life, how has your faith changed or your mission in life changed? I mean, you mentioned professional trauma, losing your business, and how that broke your heart, right?
Well, it did. That is an interesting point. Yes, it did break my heart. I had my own office in Revere.
Yeah.
It was called the Medical Treatment Center of Revere, and I worked my. I still have a tail. Well, actually, I don't have a tail. I worked my tail off there, and it was a love of my life, really, in a way. Not my wife and my kids are real loves of my life and my family and so forth. But, professionally that was, and it was the best clinic that everybody who came in, well, a good fraction, it was really nicely run. And it was personal and professional. I did not everything perfectly, but I did everything that I could as well as I could. And I showed up on time. I was never drunk. I didn't,
And you squashed on your
I didn't
lunch
play
breaks
squash during hours. But so it was a kind of a model of the English GP practice. I did just outpatient medicine. I didn't do inpatient, and so people had other problems. They would go on. But I was, I think, pretty astute at diagnosing people,
And
and
what was the mission of doing that? Like, what was the telos or the metaphysical
well,
backdrop of
I
that?
don't want to make it sound too romantic. I did it
Yeah.
as to earn a living. Um, my medical career, I had
So
some.
there was the funds part, but what was the faith? There's got had to have been like an element of faith.
Well,
Maybe it got out of hand sometimes. Maybe at some point you felt you were the hand of God or something like that. But there's still got to be
well,
some sort of aspirational
okay. Well, let me say
aspect
this
of that,
about that. I
right?
mean, I
Meaningful, right?
when I left medical school, I went into, I did a year internship. I don't want to spend too much time on this. Then I went to West
Right.
Virginia, and I worked on my own because I had been slated. I decided to go into psychiatry, got into Yale psychiatry residency,
Wow.
but I broke up with my girlfriend during internship, and I just needed some time and space out. So I went into cowboy mode, and I found a place where I could work with my 1 year of internship in the U.S., and that was West Virginia. So it didn't the poorest county in the country
Really?
at the time, and I worked there for a year, and I did outpatient medicine. Anyway, while I was out there, I was going to maybe stay or not, and I got called by Mass General Hospital because they had an opening. I got called like the 12th hour, like in June or so, with like a week or two and I made a decision. Do I want to be in West Virginia? And I wanted to get married at some point. I wasn't meeting the right person for me, I thought. And so I said, fine, I'll go back into society. So I left rural West Virginia. I went back to Boston. I went back to the East Coast. I wound up in Mass General. It was really intense, and it was, I kind of had a not quite culture shock, but I was used to doing my own things, my own hours, my own way, that kind of stuff. And I'm a pretty headstrong guy, and I didn't mesh into that program. It was a very strict program, and we mutually agreed, it wasn't going to work. So I left within a year, and then I was kind of on my own, and I started doing outpatient medicine. And so I wound up here and there working for other people, blah, blah, blah. And there was an opportunity came along, this medical treatment center, Revere, and I wound up working there part-time. And then over time, I wound up taking it over. They wanted to just close it. I took it over. They were just going to abandon it. So I paid them rent for a while, the hospital, and then I wound up owning the place. And so for 27 years, I was there, and it was my own gig. And I had not really planned on doing that general practice stuff. And I had my own little issues with medicine because, my household, I was mentioning earlier, was a tight household. And my mom, I wanted to be a fireman. I wanted to be this. I wanted to be that. When I said doctor, she's like, that's the one you said. So she always brought me back to that. She's a Jewish mom.
Yeah.
And so I wanted being a doctor. But I had various reservations about it because when medical school, it was not the great learning experience. You're basically kind of like you're like the goose in foie gras. You're just fed stuff until your brain is that fatty liver that gets harvested. All well and good. No, I didn't appreciate it. I was young-ish, and I didn't appreciate how much work and effort you needed to know all this stuff. And so it's very militaristic, and you're kind of in boot camp for a number of years. And then so I resisted it. And so psychiatry seemed the way of doing medicine light, getting kind of the talk and the conversation and the humanity.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I wasn't planning on being a primary care guy, but there I was. And, some of it's interesting, some of it's not. I mean, you see 1,000 sore throats. I mean, how many of them are interesting? Not all of them. But,
Yeah.
over time, I think, I don't know, I got older or whatever. And I started to relax and enjoy the people for who they were and get more conversational. And then it becomes really fascinating. And yeah, you also have to be correct. I mean, you can't just think one thing is this when it's not. So you have to keep open-minded because, the truth has a vote. If you think everything that comes in is strep throat, it's not always going to be the case. Some of it's going to be Coxsackie virus or something else. You're going to have to be surprised, and you have to leave yourself open to that and to be wrong. There's a certain amount of humility that comes with it. Anyway, having that be my thing where that was my practice and I had not made it in the psychiatry residency, I needed this to work. And so I worked really hard at it. And so I took business opportunities as they came along. And one of them, for instance, at one point there was Viagra came along. And, I saw no reason why I couldn't be that guy to, help people with their erectile dysfunction. Another point, when fen-phen came along, obesity, I speak pretty good Spanish. And, I advertised on the Spanish. It was near Chelsea, which is Latino. And so I wound up with a big Spanish clientele. I did these various things that I could try to do to help pay the bills and whatnot. And then when Suboxone came along, it's not like I thought, I'm going to treat the addiction world. It was a business opportunity. But whenever I take an opportunity up, I try to, spend enough time on it to, to make it work. So with the getting to another fairy tale, instead of Humpty Dumpty, I'm going to move right over to Goldilocks, if you're okay with this. But and I and I have to apologize for talking so much. I mean, you're a really great guy to talk to. I'm going to interview you, but anyway, just
Good luck.
while we're still on me,
Yeah.
Goldilocks. What there was when Suboxone came out. They have an introduction. Couldn't get a license to write at the time without going through classes. So I did, and they talk about detox or maintenance. So maintenance is kind of the methadone model, where it's the harm reduction model, where they have this problem with narcotics, and you have to treat them. And this is where the disease model really comes in. So if diabetes is a disease, and let's say it is, because it is, you can't think people through it. You can't say, you know what, I want you to think through. I want you to go find God. Be good to your family, and that'll fix your diabetes. And you take away their insulin, and they drop dead, and that's the end of your medical practice and so forth, because that's stupid. Now, the disease model is crucial to the addiction world if you're a methadone clinic. So I came up, following Eisenhower's example, I came up with the methadone industrial complex, because as a term, because there is one. And this whole disease-ification of addiction, cui bono, the Romans came up with, and like, whose benefit?
Yes.
And I don't think, arguably, it's the populace that winds up on methadone forever. Starbucks should be so lucky. Starbucks has to actually work and keep the place clean and whatnot, and compete against other whatever. But I mean, they have an addicted populace. They have people who are addicted to caffeine. That's their disease model. Coca-Cola, business, that's their business model. Coca-Cola, same thing. So there's certain things where it's like the customers keep coming back because they need that. Cigarettes, all this kind of stuff. Maybe marijuana, I don't know. But with addiction, people have problems in their lives and they go get addicted. Now, the example that I came up with was alcoholism, or alcoholics, alcohol addicts versus narcotic addicts. How do we treat those two? Now, if you were in Kabul, Afghanistan, where alcohol is a crime and it's forbidden, you could imagine somebody maybe starting, say, you know what, these people have a disease. We're going to start a vodka or an alcohol replacement clinic, and we'll have them come in. They're addicted to scotch or whatever it is, and we're going to give them this clear liquid, looks like water. We got it from Russia. They call it vodka, and we're giving it to them, dose them 3-4 times a day. They'll come in, and their alcohol needs are going to disappear, and we'll fix their problem. They have an alcohol disease, so we have to keep giving them alcohol. Now, you'd be laughed at, if you did that here. If you tried to, if this tables were turned, if alcohol prohibition, whatever, were illegal, and you open an alcohol clinic, nobody would buy into that. But somehow we have been able to do that with narcotics. This is a new foundation, a new principle. And this is where the disease model really,
does disease work hand in hand with the illegality of these substances? So if
well, that's an interesting point. Again, getting back to our Roman phrase, cui bono, who benefits? Physicians in general, the concept that we can prescribe things is a rent-seeking. You're familiar with that term economically. Economic rent is when you get a right from the king, from the government to do something. So physicians, allopaths became doctors, prescribing. That's our sine qua non of treatment, because we got this right that other people don't have to give access to these pills. Now, if you go to Mexico, you can get Viagra, for instance, over the counter. Is Viagra different in Mexico? Is erectile dysfunction different in Mexico? No, it's not. Here it's sort of becoming a little milder. You can go, sign on to Hims online, whatever, get some Viagra. But when it came out for the first, 20 years or so, it was 1997, whatever, for the first decade or so, you need a doctor, you need a physician to write that. Probably the first 20 years, 2017 or so, you need a physician to write you Viagra. Now, why? I mean, who knows? But that certainly benefits physicians. Does it benefit guys who have erectile dysfunction? I don't know. Is there any reason for it? But so you make an excellent point. Because narcotics are illegal, you need somebody to write it. Now, you could do what I intended to do. Getting back to my Goldilocks model, I thought the detox were too short. 5 days, 3 days, 7 days. Detox are too short. And maintenance, years or forever is too long. So I wanted the just right method. And I worked a fair amount at finding out what the right duration was. My feeling is if you have somebody die in your family, or you break up with your girlfriend, your wife, whatever, you have a major kind of psychological, about 4 months or so, and then you're kind of ready to get back in the flow. Your grief, whatever you want to call this, grief, divorce, whatever, the major depression part of it is about 4 months. I'm not saying it's magical or the same in every person, but that's what I decided to set as a standard for my detox program. So I gave people a 4-month detox, is like less than 1% of the dose per day.
Less than 1%. So that's what you drop them by 1 percentage point per day, or
we did it weekly or every other week or whatever, and depending on the person. But I pretty much only went down. It's like one of those what do they call those turnbuckle ratchet things. I didn't go up in their dose. So my feeling was, and I quizzed them weekly or whenever they showed up
to make sure that they're replacing the addiction with something else gradually while you decrease their
the point is gradual
physical dependence on the drug.
Right. And I gave them an opiate withdrawal scale questionnaire every time they came in. And my, it wasn't a huge study, but my analysis of that was they actually didn't have any more withdrawal symptoms during the middle of the treatment than they did at the beginning. Frankly, less. So people are able to acclimate. You're able to acclimate to something else. They weren't on narcotics their whole lives, and they don't necessarily need to be on narcotics their whole lives. It's not like diabetes. I mean, the example I give is Joe and Fred, get put into Turkish prison. And Fred is a heroin addict, and Joe is a diabetic with insulin. And they take away, they say, okay, you're in jail, get rid of all these needles. They go through their luggage, they find all these needles, they throw away all the needles. And Joe's like, wait, I need my needles. Fred's like, oh, wait, I need my needles. They both need their needles. And they take away the medication, the needles, everything. And so Joe and Fred are there in prison. Joe's a type 1 diabetic. 2 weeks, he's dead. Fred, 2 weeks, he's like feeling, maybe sad about Joe, but he's feeling awesome.
Yeah.
He's in 4 weeks, he's lifting weights, he's buffed up, he's sleeping. He went through hell. Okay, they both go through that hell of the first week without the diet, without the insulin, without the heroin. They're both going through hell the first week, but Joe's dead in 2 weeks, and Fred is better than ever in 4 weeks. Yeah. So which one's got the disease?
And I guess there's also the question of the people who are just lost. If somebody signs up or repeatedly signs up 3 or 4 times to your program and just doesn't actually want to change, right?
Right. Well, that's the psychiatry.
That light bulb, right?
That's the joke. But the thing is, I noticed this, that people do this in detoxes a lot. There's a thing, not my term of art, it's called spin dry, like in the dry, when you're washer dryer is spin dry. And a lot of narcotic addicts, they would calibrate their finances and their dosing by spin drying. So they have a $200 a day dose of heroin they have to go in order to get their feel good. And they go into the detox and they go through misery for whatever, medications, whatever. And after 3, 5, 7 days, they come out and they're intended to go back. I'm not sure what their full intentions are, but they wind up going back to drugs. But for only $50, they can be high. So there's a fair amount of recalibration that goes on, and I didn't want that as part of my clinic. So I tried to make various fences towards that. So initially I charged $185, kind of skin in the game. It was an administrative fee for my program. So I didn't want everybody. I didn't want people who just wanted, some narcotic that day. I wanted people who wanted to detox. And so I told them the administrative fee was, I spent time and effort on it. So for that $185, I spent, time with the questionnaires, I spent an hour with them, and I wanted to see if they understood what my program was. And over time, I had videos. I gave them half an hour of videos of what the process was, what is it like, testimonials from other people, that kind of stuff about that it's physically possible to detox. It shouldn't be that shocking, but a lot of them are through the methadone world, and they tell them the harm reduction model, which is that you cannot get off this. This is a lifetime problem. You're always going to be addicted. If you don't get methadone, you have the good chance of killing yourself. Now, I don't deny that people on narcotics or off narcotics can kill themselves. This is, there are issues. Nothing is perfect. But for the people who wanted to change things and wanted to get better, certainly it's a conceivable thing to do. George W. Bush announced that he's a drug addict. I don't think he was doing heroin, but he was doing cocaine at certain points, certainly alcohol, and he was an alcoholic. How did he fix himself? I don't think he did any alcohol as president. It's not like he didn't have stress. He wasn't always uniformly liked. It wasn't a happy face world for him. There were issues. The Twin Towers fell. There were wars. And I'm not saying he did everything perfectly with or without drugs, but he did it without alcohol. And how did he do it? He's a born again Christian. Now, is that the only way to fly? I don't think so. But I think you need something that's captivating, consuming, because we have big needs. We are human beings, and we have needs.
Yeah. We have big needs.
Yeah, we do.
So now that you're not doing that anymore, how are you finding meaning and purpose? I guess you started this channel and you're writing in books, right? So your needs don't go away. Just the avenue through which you express them has to develop over time.
Yeah.
Or has developed.
I think we have a striving within us. I think we all know that we are capable of more, and that we are capable of doing better. And that goes for me. I think we all have our urges, that we could easily. I think humans are potentially a lazy, hedonistic bunch, and we feel good temporarily with that, but we don't feel soulfully good unless we are creating something beyond ourselves. And again, I do think it's different from women and men. Women have that ability to create something beyond themselves. And my wife, I don't think she wanted to have children, but that was, I don't know, we fell in love, and then she started to think about wanting to have children. I mean, can you imagine somebody crazy enough to look at me and want more of me? I mean, that's a whole separate issue. But it's biology, so we're going to chalk it up to instinct and biology. Yeah. But anyway, but you create an individual. It's an incredible journey. I mean, that is the biggest journey of our lives, personally, and it's not over. And hopefully they recreate that as well, and procreate and create. But it's not, this is a weird, I forget the name of that movie, where everyone stops having kids.
Children of Men?
Possibly.
That's one where they don't stop, but reproduction stops.
Yeah. And that's kind of, I mean, I'm on this little single suburban block here, and maybe there's 20 houses on it. And, that my son's cohort of kids, it's like 15 kids or whatever, grew up, whatever. And I'm like mentally, no grandkids yet. They're all like late 20s, early 30s, zero. And this is not a normal thing over the history of time. We make fun of other generations, and they did this, and they, pressed this and this, but,
they got us here.
Yeah. And I don't know of anybody who wasn't born from a man and a woman. I mean, that's like none of my friends. Anyway,
the sack babies are coming though.
So let me spin this back to you. What motivates Benjamin Boyce? And how are you running through life?
Well, my life's in major change mode. My life is like completely going in a totally different direction, and in the past 4 weeks, it's completely changed course. But generally, it's there's a hierarchy of work. Work has been, not work. I guess work has been like a major foundation for my sense of meaning. And by work, it used to be pursuing some sort of writing. Like I tried to create worlds through novels and through writing. And then I finally went and I worked with children for the first part of my adulthood, and I worked in preschools, and I found that I could work there by creating songs, or creating it was for a long time it was creativity. And then I went to college. I went to the Evergreen State College to like try to grasp what I wanted out of literature, out of being a writer or a intellectual. And then my life completely changed at the end of that, where I landed online talking to people first and then listening to people later. And so I've always wanted to be productive and prolific and potent within my profligacy, or however that word is going. And now it's to become a stage. My meaning or my work is to evoke reality out of other people and then put that reality online to kind of show that this virtual world can have a home for reality and can be a place where the arc of human consciousness and the arc of human souls can bridge through all these ones and zeros and hit other people elsewhere, and then maybe change or open up or broaden people's lives, and maybe more than just people's lives, but communities' lives. So being engaged with other people at this point is my
you're good at it.
Raison d'etre.
Yeah, I know you're good at it. I mean, you have a calming presence, and you have good intellectual basis, and your questions are probing. So what's the? Can you delineate or divulge the 4-week recent?
There's this little woman. It's a woman. I guess this is your story. How many subscribers do you have? I don't want a dick swinging contest. I just like a little private nugget put on the internet somewhere where.
Well, we can pass on that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I accidentally I knew a person in my area, and I went to have dinner, just a casual dinner. And we had a great time, and then she invited me over to her house, and I hung out with her 2 kids. She's got a couple of kids, and she was recently divorced. And when I walked out of her house, we just had 4 hours together. And when I walked out of her house, I just realized that I never wanted to be out of her presence ever again.
Wonderful.
I just felt totally renovated by that. So it's just been completely changing everything to orient myself to this person. And I'm 46, and she's 10 days younger than me, so it's kind of odd that this is happening so late in life for us. So
you look. I thought you were in your 30s. You look young.
Yeah, no, she looks young too, but yeah, something about the elasticity of her collagen, or we're baby Gen Xers, Yeah.
So, are you able to sustain yourself on your videos and your intellectual pursuits?
I need to figure out how to sustain myself long term. I do have a blue collar job that supplements my income. I need to figure out how to go forward. It's not like having a GP practice, right? I'm totally at the mercy of the audience, and I'm totally at the mercy of Google and Twitter and Facebook, and well, not Facebook, fuck them. So I'm at the mercy of these bigger companies, and insofar as I can play the game correctly, I can continue to eke out some sort of living out of doing this. But it could end next week if I don't continually put product out, right?
Yeah,
so it's completely grindstone until I don't know, until I stop, and then it's done, right?
So what's been the most elucidating part for you? What's the surprise you've had from your interviews?
From my interviews generally? That's a really big, how do I distill all these? I've had probably 600 interviews at this point. There's so I went out with this woman, and we were sitting in this busy restaurant, and we're kind of talking over the crowd, and we had this waitress come up serving us, and the waitress was really interesting because she was giving a certain sort of attention to the woman and a certain sort of attention to me, and then the woman that I was with commented she seems like a nice girl, and I'm like, yeah, she does seem like a nice girl. And I saw this young waitress, probably 24, 25, and I had already kind of typed her, I had already come across this type in life. And when I meet people online, I can kind of gauge what kind of a person they are, but there's something inside of me, and I think it comes from all the years I spent with very young children, very young human beings. There's something about in my intuition that is able to open up the type of person they are, to open up that surface person they are, and to provide them the space. It's not something that I'm initiating, but I'm providing a space for them to open up. And I've noticed that people are able to become more real under the attention that I'm
Hmm.
facilitating, whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
And by real, I mean they become more detailed, they become more personal, and they feel safe in that. And even though the medium through which I work is extremely public, they're still able to be extremely personal inside of
Hmm.
that. So I don't know exactly what's going on, but that's been such a gift for me to be able to facilitate that. And I'm sure in a psychiatric environment or a psychological environment, you're able to do, or a counseling environment, you're able to do the same thing. I'm sure there's different qualities to that because it is one-on-one and it's personal. It's very private. But there's something magical about that human interaction above and
Yeah.
beyond the problem or the
Yeah.
topic at hand.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a very well put. And it's kind of the magical thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Well, and do you have stories coming out? Do you have novels or books or
I need to, yeah, I have an evergreen musical that's about three quarters of the way done, and I'll probably be done with that in about a year because it just takes a long time to get all those songs down and then to figure out how they all work together. And then I have seven novels. I wrote 20 novels, and then it ends up to be about seven novels, a cycle. It starts at the beginning and ends at the end of time, and but everything is poetry, so it just takes me forever to put every word in the right place,
hmm
which is not easy. And it's not easy, and it's always changing. So yeah, I have those, but that's something that will be revealed in a different phase of my life. Right now, I'm a public figure, and I'll
Yeah,
get
no,
back to
you
being
are.
that
You have an
private
audience.
figure.
I've
But,
certain my Facebook friends. I've got a few thousand
yeah,
friends,
yeah,
but
yeah.
they're great
Friend.
people.
Yeah,
And it's been interesting in Facebook in general because I've usually met people and you meet people, and then you find out what they think. Here, you find out what they think, and then you get to meet them.
yeah.
Um, but I've got a few friends who really love your site and your thoughts. And one friend of mine, wrote when she heard that I was going to be on with you, like so excited. Um,
Hmm.
so you're making headway there. That is success.
It's an odd kind of success, but yeah. And I don't know what to do
Well,
with it, so I hope
well, it's
it becomes
you know,
stable. But
let's you could have a potato farm, or something like that, and you could be producing whatever. But this is probably perhaps more aligned with your capabilities and your unique skill. So it could be worse.
no, it could be worse. It could be a lot worse.
Could be worse. I
Yeah.
was thinking to put that on my epitaph, but I don't think it fits.
It could have been worse.
It could have been worse. That works. I have my wife's epitaph.
Was
Um,
hers.
well, she she's not really humble bragging, but she's like, oh my God, I don't know how you put up with me. I'm so crazy, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And everybody's crazy. Everybody's crazy in her own way. And I said, look, you're just not that crazy. I mean,
Hmm.
I get it. I'm okay with it. It doesn't, we're beyond whatever happened, whatever. Anyway, so her epitaph is on her gravestone. We're going to have not that crazy, but
Not
it's
that
hard.
crazy.
You have to italicize that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
so it's like not that crazy.
yeah.
Um, but it may not actually transpire, especially if I die first. So,
Yeah, and then it might be that crazy, right?
well, who knows?
Without you around. I don't know.
Well, no, I think people do get a little crazier. My dad died in 1979,
Oh,
and
wow.
my mom was an interesting woman
Hmm.
in many ways, and it got hard. She had humans have this thing where they have to talk stuff out,
Yeah, yeah,
and she didn't have that to the same extent, and it was harder for my younger brother.
yeah.
It's just I don't know. That seems to be our thing, our bird song. I wake up and the birds are all singing to each other, and endlessly, and the crickets and cicadas at night. But we have our song. Our song is a very complicated one.
Hmm. Well, thanks for this opportunity, Randall.
Yeah, yeah, I
It was great
appreciate
to
that.
prick your
Thank you.
brain.
Yeah, no, I very much enjoyed it, and
Give me more
I'm sorry,
context to think about
sorry
the
if my
world's
interviewing you.
problems. No, no,
Turned
no, not at all. I love learning. I'm not that interesting. I feel very hollow most of the time. So
Oh,
I love feasting on other people.
you should get
That
that
sounds a little
gravestone.
vi-
Like
Vampiric what? What foam?
You've seen Great Foam?
Great foam?
Great Foam, FOAM. It's a handy. It's like buy it at Home Depot.
Okay, and
And
I just
it
pour it in
just
my mouth to
yeah, I
expand
guess it's
myself.
like it's for filling gaps, like
Yeah,
behind the sink or whatever. You pour this
yeah,
foam in, and then 2 seconds later, it's like 12 times the size,
yeah.
and it hardens up. So I'm only speaking as a I'm making
Metaphorically.
light. You're not. The Wizard of Oz. I mean, I get to it's not quite a fairy tale, but just to change fairy themes, the Wizard of Oz. His miracle capability, and I tried to channel this in medicine or in my
Mm,
psychotherapeutic aspect of medicine with
mm,
narcotic addicts and others. Is oftentimes I assume you've seen the Wizard of Oz, but if you haven't, just spoiler alert. The Cowardly Lion, the Tin Man, and the
Strawman.
Scarecrow.
Scarecrow, yeah.
They are each in pursuit of their needs. The Scarecrow, the Tin Man doesn't have a heart. The Cowardly Lion has no courage, and the Scarecrow has no brains. But as life plays out, they exhibit qualities in that
Yeah.
regard. And the wizard's no wizard. So when they pull him from behind the green curtain, they pull him out. He's a short guy from Kansas and whatever. But his magical capabilities are nil. Yet he cures them all. He points out that in the course of their travails and their trials and their train of moving through Oz,
Yeah.
that the Cowardly Lion was anything but cowardly, and the Scarecrow was clever, and the Tin Man, and so this is a redemption. This is a fulfilling moment, and so it's not great foam he uses, but he uses the. I wish I could make a good pun here, but anyway, he uses the moment to
Yeah.
basically fill their gaps and
Yeah.
to put things out. And this is what we need societally oftentimes, and certainly
Recognition. Recognition of each other's greatness.
well, yeah, and we need to be given solace and comfort that we are okay. I mean, the movie, the scene, I could weep now thinking about it. It's Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? And so, there's a whole movie, right? And then at the very end, Matt Damon has survivor guilt, and he's at the cemetery in Europe, and all these crosses and occasional Jewish star, and he's staring out them. He's talking with Tom Hanks' character, who sacrificed to get him, and he just wondered. He wondered whether he was good enough,
Yeah.
and whether he was worth it. And and his wife says that he worked hard, and Tom Hanks would be proud of him. That is what we all basically need. We need those moments, and it's very simple. We do it to our dogs. We pet them. You're a good boy. That kind of stuff. But we
Yeah.
need. We are missing that, and the people who, and this is maybe facile, but the people who go through addictions and whatnot, they need that as well. They didn't get that internally. They didn't get that, in those first three formative and final, forming years, and they're in pursuit of it, and they pursue it in the wrong places. So we all need solace, we need comfort, and we need affirmation, but we don't need it if we didn't do the things that Matt Damon did in order to be true to Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
So you don't get it if you didn't earn it. And he even so, he needs to be affirmed that he did. So it's a two-part equation.
Yeah.
You need to do those things, and they need to have somebody recognize it. But you can't do it with either one. If you recognize something that didn't happen, it's hollow, and you know it. And if you did the things and nobody recognizes, it's a tree falling in the forest, that doesn't necessarily work either. Anyway.
You're a wise man, Randall Bach.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to let you head on to the rest of life. Thank you so much for being on my show. I'm going to spend 1 second and just give my shameless self-promotion, such as I will. This is my book. If you want to help support my podcast, you don't have to read it, but you do have to buy it. Um, this is Overturning Zika. I actually do think people who've read it, it's for the general reader. It's not a medical book per se. It's about the last pandemic, the pandemic that never was, probably in the first place. It was presented to us as something completely different from what was the reality. Zika is a real virus, and microcephaly is a real and tragic problem for babies congenitally. But it just so happens that one doesn't cause the other. And getting to another fairy tale, I'm the kid in the Emperor's New Clothes, who I don't have a pony in this race. I'm not making any money either way, aside from the book. I'm not on any research grants. I'm not an infectious disease guy, but I do like Sherlock Holmes, and I think that finding out this narrative has been one of the interesting challenges of my recent life, and I hope it helps women throughout the tropics and families throughout the tropics in getting a new reality, and perhaps puts a little bit of chagrin and humility into WHO, CDC types who think they can just name diseases irrespective of the actual realities.
Fuck them.
All right. So
Pardon my French.
That's cool. All right. So
thanks so much, Randall.
I'm going to end things here. Thank you for being with me, Benjamin. I appreciate it.